Watch as I demonstrate how to create two completely different looks using just one stencil. This tutorial will show you how to get the most out of your stencils by showcasing two unique and creative designs. Whether you're a beginner or an experienced crafter, this video will inspire you to think outside of the box and experiment with your stencil designs in new ways. Hi everyone, I'm Mindy Eggen and welcome to my channel. I would love it if you subscribed, liked this video, and shared it with your friends. The stencil that I'm going to be using today is coming out of the Sunny Days card kit from Gina K Designs, but keep in mind you could use these techniques with any of these layering stencils that Gina has. She has quite a few in her collection to create these layered flowers. This one will be sold separately at the next release. The stencil is called Twisted Stems and it is a 4-piece layering stencil. The first layer of the stencil is going to have the open areas of the flower. The second layer is going to give you some detail to the flower. The third is the open area of the stems and leaves. And the fourth layer is adding detail to those leaves. So the first way that I'm going to use the stencil is really how it was intended. I'm taking a piece of layering weight white cardstock cut to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I secured that down to my work surface using some repositionable tape. But now instead of going straight onto the front of the card, I am going to tilt my stencil, and I think this is going to give us a whole unique look. So this is layer number 1 of the stencil, which they are all labeled in the bottom left-hand corner, I believe, is where you're going to see the number of the stencil. I held that down with some washi tape, and then I'm masking off the other areas of my cardstock using some Post-it tape. I like to overblend sometimes, so that's going to protect the rest of my card. I'm starting with some light lilac ink and a blending brush and just lightly going over all the open areas of the stencil to give my base color. I'll remove layer 1. I'm going to take layer 2 of the flowers stencil and I'm going to place it over the top, and it's going to fill in those areas. You'll be able to see easily how it lines up, holding that down again with that washi tape and masking off the areas of my cardstock. I will come in with a slightly darker shade, which is the medium lilac, and apply that to the open areas of the stencil. If you don't have a darker shade, you could also use that light lilac like I did in the beginning and just apply a little bit more of a heavier hand to it to get a different shade. Now, before I remove this stencil, I'm going to come in with a dark lilac and use a detail blending brush. The detail blending brushes really help me kind of focus in on smaller areas. I'm starting kind of in the bottom center of each of the flowers and adding a little bit of that darker color. This is going to add some really nice contrast to my flowers. Then I'm going to remove this layer of the stencil. You can see how beautiful these flowers are looking. And I'm going to bring in the next layer, which is the third layer of the stencil. And it's going to be the first layer of the leaves and the stems. So again, I needed to remember to tilt my stencil and line those up with the flowers, hold that down again with the washi tape, and mask off my cardstock. If you are confident that you are not going to overblend, or maybe if you're using smaller blending brushes, you wouldn't need to mask off the cardstock, but I prefer to be safe than sorry. Now the first layer of green that I'm going to apply is going to be Jelly Bean Green ink. Again, just using my standard blending brush to apply that color to the open area of the stencil. I'll then remove this layer and I'm going to bring in the fourth and final stencil, which is going to add some detail to those stems and leaves. Once this is secured down in place, again with my washi tape or even Post-it tape that you may have, or maybe your surface is magnetic, then I'm going to come in with my darker shade of green, and that is going to be using fresh asparagus. So this is my first way of using this stencil, is not just using the stencil the way it was intended, but tilting it to make it look like the flowers are coming up out of the corner of my card front. Gina has lots of different layering flower stencils, so this would work with any of those particular stencils. After I have these completely filled in with that darker shade of green, this card is complete. I'm going to set it off on the side and work on the second way to use the stencil. I did clean the stencil off screen using some rubbing alcohol and a rag. Before I get to the stencil, I want to create an ink blended background first. So again, I'm starting out with a piece of layering weight white cardstock from Gina Designs, cut to 4¼ by 5½. And I am going to start in the middle of the cardstock with light orchid ink, just kind of blending up towards the top a little bit and towards the bottom, having it kind of fade off into the white of that cardstock so that I can blend it with other colors. Now towards the top, or what is going to be the top of my card, I'm bringing in the medium lilac, and I'm going to bring that down into that orchid, so it's going to create a beautiful transition of color. The next color I'm going to bring in is sea glass, and that's going to be what is going to be the bottom of my card front. Again, using a blending tool and starting up off of the cardstock. So starting on that glass mat, working my way onto the cardstock and blending that up into that orchid. And this is going to give us a beautifully blended background. For this particular technique, I'm only going to use 2 layers of the stencil. So I'm using the layers of the stencil that have the most open area. In this case, it is going to be the first layer of the stencil, so the most open area of the flowers. Again, I used repositionable tape and secured my cardstock down to my work surface. I really loved on my first card how the flowers were tilted, so I'm going to do that on this card too. Securing that down with my washi tape and masking off the areas with the Post-it tape. Now, the fun part of this is using black onyx ink. I'm going to turn this image from a layering image stencil to a silhouette image. And I did that by using the black ink and the areas of the stencil that have the most open area. So again, this is stencil 1, going pretty heavy-handed with the black ink. And once I removed the stencil, I was a little worried that the ink would be pretty wet because I did apply a heavy amount. So I am just going to bring in my heat tool really quick and just kind of briefly dry that so I don't smear any of that ink. Once I'm comfortable that it is completely dry, I'm going to bring in the 3rd layer of the stencil. So this is really the first layer of the stems and leaves. I lined that up with my flower, held that down again with that washi tape, and masked off the areas of my cardstock with the Post-it tape. And then again, I'm going to bring in that black ink. So really any black ink will work. The black onyx covers that color very nicely. I really want to make sure that I'm going over all of those open areas of the stencil, so kind of blending from left to right and right to left to really fill in all of those areas. And then once I remove this layer of the stencil, look how gorgeous this turned out. And just think of all the different silhouettes you can create with the other layering stencils you already may have in your collection. Now, I planned on using some sentiments that I had already done up in a previous video from the Delicate Flowers Polyglaze sheets, but they were pretty small compared to my card fronts. These would make beautiful 1-layer cards, but I wanted to trim it down just to get proportion-wise. I needed it to match my sentiments. So I'm going to trim these panels down using Master Layouts 5. And this die also leaves a beautiful stitched edge. So I did this to both of the card fronts, is trimming it down to this smaller panel. I want to also kind of recommend that once you run this through your die cut machine, be sure to go back and clean your plates because sometimes that black ink may not have been dry enough and may transfer to your plates. So be sure to clean that before you do any more die cutting. Here's a look at what I was planning out. I went ahead and die cut out these scalloped frames using the Master Layouts 4. For the card with the purple flowers, I plan on using matte gold cardstock for that scalloped border or that scallop mat. And then on my silhouette card, I'm going to die cut it out of black onyx cardstock. So same stencil, 2 completely different looks and 2 completely different cards. These are the sentiments that I had previously done in another video, which I will link at the top of the screen here. I used the Polyglaze sheets for the Delicate Flowers. So I foiled them in 14 karat fancy foil. So they're beautiful and shiny. I went ahead off screen and die cut out a few more of those to layer behind it to create dimension. I like using my Connect glue in a fine tip bottle, and as I was filming this, I happened to need to refill my fine tip bottle. So I'm just showing you that here where I took the large bottle of Connect glue and I'm squeezing that into that fine tip bottle. So that's how I refill them, or if it's a brand new bottle, that's how I fill it up. and then I can just place the cap back on top. Then I can come in and start layering up my sentiments. I do have 2 different sentiments, one for each card, and I did the same thing for both where I layered up about 3 layers of cardstock for each of the sentiments. And before I start attaching anything to the front of my cards, I do want to add splatter because it's something I just love to do. So for my silhouette background, I have this bleed-proof white ink I mixed with a little bit of water, and I'm splattering it onto the front of my card. I'm using a splat box that I have some paper towel in, and it's going to catch or try to catch all of the excess splatters. Now for my other card with the white background and the purple flowers, that one I'm going to bring in some black ink. And I know black ink might scare some people. I think it adds just a beautiful contrasting touch to the flowers. And it's a very, very small paintbrush, so it's going to give me fine splatters. If I want to bring in a little bit bigger of a splatter, I would use a bigger paintbrush. I'm going to take my heat tool and I'm going to dry both panels so I don't smear any of my splatters. Then I can work on the assembly of my cards. So I plan on popping up both of these mats with foam tape. This is foam tape from Altenew, and I'm trimming that down with my mini recoil scissors. You don't have to add this much dimension to your card fronts if you don't want. I really love popping these up. I think it just gives a great separation to everything. So I added the foam tape behind the blended panel and also that scalloped mat. And I'm going to do that for both of my cards. So I'll remove the backing of that foam tape, and I'm going to place this on top of a piece of white cardstock that is cut to 4¼ by 5½. So I really like how the white background or that main panel matches my inside piece or the die cut panel. I'm going to do the same thing with my black cardstock. I really did feel the need for the foam tape for that scalloped because I think it helps separate that a little bit. I know it's black on black, which may be kind of hard to see, but in person it looks amazing. I'm using the liquid glue to attach my sentiments, and then I just place something heavy on there and let that really secure down to the front of the card. Now, as I was doing this, I started rethinking one of my sentiments. On this particular one with the gold matte or the matte gold cardstock, I did that on purpose because the matte gold ties into my foiled sentiment. But on my silhouette card, it just wasn't quite meshing with me. So off screen, I stamped the sentiment off of the Delicate Flowers stamp set, die cut it out, and then I'm going to adhere this over the top of my foiled sentiment. So all of my black borders match my sentiment. On camera, I know it probably doesn't look like I foiled the sentiment because the foil is reflecting my black camera up above, but it really is foiled and gorgeous shine to it. To finish off both of these cards, I decided to bring in some of my favorite embellishments, which is the clear quartz sequence mix from Gina K Designs. I have some over in a triangle tray, just using my pick and stick tool to pick them up, place a little dab of the Connect glue down, and then adhering those to the front of the card. And I did the same thing for both cards. Then I can give you a closer look at each of the cards. So the first one here is my silhouette image. I love this idea of using the stencil to create silhouettes. And then here's a look at the second card, or actually my first card, where I used the design as intended, but gave it a little bit of a twist, literally, by tilting the design. So I hope these ideas have inspired you and you can look at your stencils in a whole new way and give these techniques a try. I will have all of my supplies listed down below in the video description and over on my blog. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you again real soon.